Hello, Spartans. My name is Dave Isbell, and I am the Assistant Director of Alumni Professional Enrichment in the MSU Alumni Association. It's my privilege to welcome you to today's presentation, How to Write a Resume for STEM Careers. Before I introduce you to our presenter, I want to point out to you the chat window on the left side of your screen. This is where you can type your questions, which we'll be sure to answer by the end of the presentation. Also, my assistant Kara Swain is logged in as Helping Spartans. If you're having technical difficulties, please see the pod options at the top right corner of the chat feature or the bottom right of Leslie's picture there. From there, you can click Start Chat with Hosts, and Kara will help you. For questions to the presenter, please be sure to use the Everyone tab at the bottom left of the chat. All of the comments and hyperlinks that get shared throughout this presentation will be present and live in the recording. Also, we invite you to continue the conversation with us on Twitter. We are at Helping Spartans, and the hashtag will be STEM Resume for this discussion. I didn't mention that these do get recorded. They can be found at spartanshelpingspartans.com. For information about upcoming webinars, live streams, and other events, please visit us at alumni.msu.edu/lens. With all of that said, I'm happy to introduce you to Leslie Toth, President of Toth Resume Consulting, LLC. Leslie comes from a distinguished 15-plus year career in human resources and is a certified professional resume writer and certified professional in human resources. Her portfolio includes 8-plus years of client success stories, helping clients take their careers to the next level. Leslie holds an MBA in Human Resource Management from Oakland University, as well as a Bachelor of Science from Michigan State University. Leslie's experience as a recruiter has allowed her the unique opportunity to partner with top companies, including several on the Fortune 500 list. As a result of this extensive experience, Leslie knows what hiring managers want and what it takes for candidates to be successful in a job hunt. She's skilled in the art of developing effective resumes, cover letters, and online profiles, helping clients achieve their career goals. What makes Toth Resume Consulting LLC stand out from the competition is Leslie's gifted ability to write a professional resume after a personal phone coaching interview. She creates resumes customized to each client's unique situation. Leslie has been a member of the Professional Association of Resume Writers and Certified Professional Resume Writer since 2009. Thank you for being here with us, Leslie. We look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you very much, David. I appreciate that. Thank you, Spartans, for having me today, and I appreciate you joining us on this call to learn more about writing resumes for STEM careers. So I'm going to just jump right into it. And at first, I want to talk to you. I know we have all career levels here on the call, whether it's entry level, new college grads, all the way up to executive levels. So I wanted to first talk about what a resume is. A resume is a short account of your career and qualifications prepared for a position or for an application that you're applying for a job. The purpose of the resume is to highlight your careers, your abilities, your skills, and let the reader know something about somebody that they have never met or seen before. So STEM resumes could be a little bit different from, say, an accountant or a human resources resume. STEM candidates typically have research experience, laboratory experience, and we definitely want to highlight that, whether it's in the academic world or whether it's in a corporate environment. So sometimes the prospect of building a resume can be intimidating, specifically for somebody who's new to this and new to the job search. The ideal resume in a STEM field will describe the jobs and research positions he or she has held. It should give a strong impression of a candidate's interests, bases of knowledge, and transferable skills. Your resume should not be long or boring. It should not be a simple list of jobs held or an inaccurate representation of yourselves. What it should be is an effective resume should contain information that prospective employers are interested in learning about you, specifically about your education and your background. It should be well written and very professional. Most people don't realize this, but your resume is your marketing tool. It's designed to create a favorable impression about yourself. It may get you the interview, but it's not going to get you the job. Once you get in the door, it's going to be your responsibility to get in the door. Your resume is a personal account of yourself listing your education and training, experience, skills, and abilities. A resume should provide an accurate, concise, and original presentation of yourself, and it is going to be a resource for an employer at an interview. Most employers spend a maximum of 3 minutes, maybe 4, reviewing resumes. It's been my experience in the past that most hiring managers and HR professionals spend approximately a minute or less initially reading resumes to determine which candidates they want to bring in for interviews. So you really have a very short period of time to grab the reader's attention right away. Just some general guidelines about resumes. Typically, the length for recent college grads or college students would be 1 page. My rule of thumb is for people who have more than 5 years of experience in typically 2 or more positions to summarize, you can go 2 pages. But really anybody with less experience than 5 years or just coming out of school, 1 page is more than sufficient. As far as layout is concerned, you want to direct the reader's eye to headings, very well called out headings in the layout. I would not use a font any larger than a 14, and I would not recommend anything smaller than 10. Those are, at that point, it's getting very difficult for the reader to read. As far as paper is concerned, you want to use an 8.5 by 11 paper, and I would use a standard resume paper that you can find at any office supply store. And my recommendation to my clients is always white or cream only. Many people, especially new college grads, occasionally want to go something a little more creative to show their personality, but I believe that white or cream is the most acceptable. Continuing on the lines of layout, we want to make sure that you leave enough white space. So 1-inch margins, down to maybe 0.75 is acceptable on all sides. You want to make sure that the resume does not look cluttered and that you're cramming a lot of information into a small space. We also want to make sure that we're consistent with the indentations, use of capitalizations, the font, and spacing. And I get the question a lot, people asking me, well, can I use multiple fonts in my resume? My recommendation is no. We can call things out by using bold, underline, and italics, but I would keep the same font consistency throughout the document. More things to remember when you're writing your resume: proofread, proofread, proofread. Do not always rely on Word to spell check your document for you. Many times Word will read a word and determine that it is spelled correctly, but the intended meaning is not the way that you would like it presented on the document, so it could be spelled incorrectly. Always good to have another set of eyes look at it so that you're catching those little things. Once you look at a document multiple times, most people don't realize that they are glancing over some of the errors. So important things to remember: grammar, spelling, typographical errors, punctuation. And you always want to stress your accomplishments as results. And that is something that we're going to talk about a little bit further in the presentation, so I want to make sure that I highlight it here, but we'll cover it further later. You want to tailor your content to each position. And this is a question that I receive on a daily basis. Do I really have to tailor my resume to each position that I'm applying for? And my answer is unequivocally yes. Your resume is being read most of the time, before it gets to a human reading it, is being read by a computer system. These applicant tracking systems are using software that is screening resumes for keywords. The keywords are being pulled from the job posting that you're reading on your screen, so you want to make sure that the keywords that are in the job posting are also included in your resume. Also, if you have experience that is specifically related to something that you've done in the document, in the job posting, and it's not on your resume, you want to make sure that you include that. Call that out to the reader to say, hey, I have this specific experience that you're looking for. And information that should not be included on a resume would be anything discriminatory, which would be age, religious affiliations, anything like that. I also get the question a lot of times, are pictures okay? And I always tell everybody, no, leave the pictures to LinkedIn and make sure it's a very professional picture at that. But pictures are not, a resume is not any place for a picture. Applicant tracking systems also cannot read those pictures, and a lot of times if they see a graphic on a resume, they'll kick it out as it's not readable. So you definitely don't want to have your resume thrown into that category. There are a couple different formats that you can choose from when you're selecting your resume format. Functional resume, which emphasizes your skills and abilities. This allows you to emphasize specific skills gained through volunteer work, extracurricular activities, and things of that nature. This type of resume is often used by career changers, graduate students, and postdoc students. It allows the reader to see what you bring to the table up front, and then work down through the resume and look at your work history, which may not necessarily be as relevant as the experience you gained in school or through volunteer experience. The chronological resume, which is the most typical format used here in the United States, is listing dates of employment in reverse chronological order as their headings, and then talking about your work history underneath that. This seems to be very effective for the majority of most of us in the working world. So at this point, and I've asked a few HR people just to poll over the last couple weeks, they would prefer to see chronological resumes because they feel that it portrays the candidate a little bit better. Functional resumes sometimes are viewed as somebody's hiding something, somebody may not have the exact experience they're looking for, or they're used a lot of times to hide gaps in employment. And from the unofficial poll that I have taken recently, I was told that it would be better to show those gaps in employment and be able to explain them than try and hide it on a functional resume. So I touched a little bit on the applicant tracking systems and making your resume a scannable document already, but you want to make sure that you're using keywords associated with positions that you're looking for. Make sure that you use any industry terminology or industry jargon that would be included in use in daily business. You want to read the job advertisement for keywords. I typically recommend printing them off and highlighting them with a highlighter just so that you have the keywords, and then going to your resume and making sure that those keywords are in your resume. You will also want to save your resume as a text file when you're applying online. Some applicant tracking systems still require you to upload your resume as a text file as opposed to a Word document or a PDF. And the reason they do that is because these text files are easier for the applicant tracking system to read the documents, and then it translates the information into a generic format that is read by the human resources manager or the hiring manager. Oh, and I just got a text. Is that TXT? Yes, Katie, that is. When you're saving in Word, you do a save as, and you save it as a TXT file. That's correct. So a lot of times when you're emailing your resume into somebody, you want to use a standard font. You want to use Arial or Times New Roman. In the body of your email, I don't recommend bolding, underlining, or italicizing the text. Make sure that you sign your email with your full name. Make sure that you proofread and spell check before you hit send. And I always recommend doing a trial send to yourself just to see what your little note in your email and then what the Word document comes over as. When you're writing the message to the recipient, you want to maintain a professional tone. One thing that I get this question a lot is you want to use a professional sounding email address. So if your email address is something like tweetybird@whatever.com, you will probably want to change that. I recommend first name dot last name at whatever.com, or first initial last name, or something, some derivative of that. I would make sure that you're using something professional. We don't want to say Spartan Girl 95 or anything like that. Although I think that's great, somebody may not like that. In your email subject line, you want to be very specific of the title. And then this is extremely important. You want to follow the employer's directions very carefully in the job posting. Some employers, and I'm seeing this more and more lately, they're requesting that the cover letter be page 1 of your Word document. So they want the cover letter and the resume all included in one document, and they want it to be one Word file. They don't want to have to open up 2 separate ones. So you want to make sure that when you move that resume down to page 2 and you add that cover letter, that the spacing is all the same and everything, the formatting that you had in your 2-page or 1-page resume carries over into this new document that now may be 2 or 3 pages. Again, you want to make sure that you're avoiding the use of characters and symbols, whether it's in the resume or it's in the email that you're sending it to. And then you want to, I always recommend left justifying your email messages. I think it looks more professional that way. So jumping into the resume. So the very top section of the resume is going to be the title block or the heading. And you want to include your name, your address, including your zip code, your daytime telephone number with area code, and your email address. And I always tell clients, make sure you're using an email address that you check daily. Don't use something that you check once every couple of days or once a week. Make sure that you have access to that, whether it's on a smartphone or you do check that daily. I am recently getting a lot of questions about people asking about address. Is address, do I have to put my full address on there? People are very concerned these days about privacy and things like that. I would recommend listing at minimum city, state, and zip code. So at least have that. Daytime telephone number, most people use a cell phone number for that. And as long as you can get a message on there, you don't have to actively answer it every single time, but as long as you can get a message and then respond to it as quickly as possible, then that's acceptable. Oh, and Cheryl just asked a question. Should the title heading be left justified, or can you write your name, etc., as right justified? So on the resume, Cheryl, you want to have your title block being at the top of the resume. In the letter, I would have it left justified on your cover letter. But if on your resume heading, you want to make sure that your name, address, city, state, zip, and telephone and email are centered at the top of the document. The next section down in the resume is a professional summary. So this is a thing that has changed recently in resume writing and in common business practice. People used to write what we call objective statements on resumes. So if you graduated, from college more than 10 years ago, you probably were still writing an objective statement on the top of your resume. Everybody knows that your objective is to get a job. So the thought process now is that you want to put a professional summary up there which tells the reader what you bring to the table. I like to tell people, if you're a marketing person, we talk about it as your value proposition. So your value proposition is what you can bring to your next employer. So our employers already know that your goal is to get a job, so take off the objective statement and write a summary that compels them to read on. A good summary statement is comprised of 4 to 6 sentences that define your unique talent and demonstrate that you're superior to the competition. When it works, your executive summary or professional summary will grab the reader's attention and carry them through the entire resume. So this is just an example of how I took an objective statement and turned it into a professional summary. So this individual wanted a position in the music industry, and I turned it around and said, this music industry professional is known for performing behind the scenes miracles, and this is what they did. So obviously, as you can see, the objective statement was kind of bland and boring. The professional summary really entices the reader to read further and want to learn more about this candidate. Getting down into work experience. So we want to summarize all significant work experience, whether it's part-time or full-time positions. We also want to include volunteer work, internships, externships, laboratory experience, whether you were a TA, anything like that. We want to highlight the responsibilities, the skills you developed, and the accomplishments. You always want to make sure the first line on each position is the company name, the job title that you held, the city, the state where it was located, and the dates of employment, followed by a description. We want to prepare a detailed list of positions, activities, or other experience that can validate your skills and abilities. Positions that you've held are not the only thing that you should consider, especially if you have limited work experience, such as new college grads. Again, non-job related activities or experiences are also great. If you were the captain of the debate team in school, that's a great thing to list on a resume. I know a lot of high school and college students, again, do a lot of volunteering or they've worked for nonprofits. Those are excellent things to include as well. So when you write a job summary or a position summary, you want to use action words and be very specific when describing each of these positions. I recommend under each job writing a brief summary, maybe 4 to 5 sentences of the work that you performed. I tell my clients a lot of times this is the tactical day-to-day type things that you did in your job, sort of the things that you have to do. And then under the position summary, list in bullet form your key accomplishments. When you're writing key accomplishments, you want to, if at all possible, list anything quantifiable. So the example I've given here is planned, prepared, and managed annual budget of $30,000 or collected and maintained account records for 100 members. So anything that you can quantify is always going to grab the reader's attention. So in talking about non-job related activities and experience, have you ever been active in a local club? Maybe you served on a board or as an officer. Did you sew and tailor your own clothes? Did you make routine repairs to your vehicles? Can you speak a foreign language? Listing computer experience is also a must in this day and age on a resume. And then again, military service or internships or externships are something else that we would want to include on resumes. And each of these activities show how you've developed as a person, so therefore we want to make sure we include them on your resume. A few things to consider when you're writing a resume, and this probably is going to pertain more to experienced professionals rather than new college grads, but I don't recommend going into depth with earlier jobs in your career. I typically recommend that my clients summarize work experience for the last 8, 10, 12 years, depending on how many positions that is. So the earlier career experience shows that you've gotten to the position that you're in, so it'll show your career progression, but the work itself isn't always relevant to what you're doing now. So you want to focus on your most recent and relevant work. And if you're making a career change or have limited work history, you want an employer to focus on where you're going rather than where you've been. So when you're listing education, my recommendation, unless you are a new college grad, I always list education on the bottom of page 2 of a resume. People want to see the most recent relevant work experience first on top, and they also want to see what you bring to the table or that value proposition. They will go and search out whether you have a degree. If the job requires it, then they will go and find it. So you always want to list your highest degree first, followed by other degrees. So if you have a PhD, you would list PhD, and then if you have a master's, you list that underneath it, and then a bachelor's underneath that. You always want to list your major and your minor, and you want to spell out the entire name of the school. So I see a lot of, and I see this in a lot of new college grads, they'll list MSU instead of Michigan State University. So we always want to make sure that you spell out MSU or spell out Michigan State University and include the location of the school where you attended. Oh, I see a couple of questions coming in. So Katie's asking, if the name of the school you graduated from changed names, do you use the name that it was then or the name that it is now? I would list both. I would list, because your diploma, and if they actually ask for proof of graduation, your diploma is going to say the school that you graduated from, but then in parentheses, I would list the name that it currently is, so that you have both on there. That same theory stands to be true if a company has changed names, has been purchased since you worked for them. I would list the name of the company that you worked for when you were there, and then the name of the new company in parentheses. Oh, let's see here. So Megan asked a question. In a corporation looking for a VP level, I have experience. So Megan, I would, yes, if you have experience in distribution and supply chain and the experience was relevant, but it was quite a long time ago, then I would definitely list it. And there's a couple of different creative ways that we could do that. We could pull some of the accomplishments into the summary at the top to say that this is what you've done, and then do a shorter summary at the bottom, or we can just expand on that summary closer to the bottom of page 2. And then Megan asked about maiden names on degrees. So you don't need to list your maiden name on your resume. On the job application that you're going to fill out, they will ask if you have a maiden name. Excuse me. And then when you go to, if they actually ask for your proof of graduation and you show them your degree, then they'll see on your application that you were Megan Smith and now you're Megan Jones. So the names will translate at that point. Oh, and somebody asked the question, if the company was bought out multiple times, would it be appropriate to list all names and changes or just the first and most recent? I would just list the first and most recent. All right, let's see, anything else about education? So any other colleges and universities that you attended? So if you went to, say, Saginaw Valley and you took a year of school there before you transferred to Michigan State, then I would list general education coursework at Saginaw Valley State University, but then list your bachelor's degree from Michigan State. So you would want to list Michigan State first as completing the degree, but listing that you attended Saginaw Valley below it. You do not need to list your high school degree. It's assumed that once you get to college, everybody has either a GED or a high school degree. And then I would only list my GPA if it's over a 3.0. Anything below that you probably don't want to include. So this one is going to be geared towards a little bit towards students. Oh, another question just came in. What about coursework towards a master's? Not currently working on. So if you've taken coursework towards a master's degree and not currently working on it, if you intend to go back, then I would put in progress. If you're not going to go back, I would list coursework towards master's of whatever it was. So that's typically how I recommend my clients do it. But if you're going to go back, I would just say in progress. So for students seeking internships, you want to make sure that you're listing your class standing. You want to list your major and your minor and a concentration if you have one. You want to follow. You always want to list your anticipated graduation date because the company is going to want to know, are you a sophomore or a junior? You know what level you're in. You're going to want to list your name and your location of the school, and then any research experience. So a lot of times for student resumes, when I'm writing them, I talk to my students a lot about, your capstone project. Describe to me your capstone project. I know engineering students that I work with a lot have a project in almost every class, or they may have a year-long project that they're working on. So those are the types of things that I will summarize on a resume, are those types of projects. You're going to want to list skills and core competencies, and these are skills that you can perform with little or no direction. So you want to build this list of keywords to describe you on your resume. These are typically the keywords that are used as filters when in applicant tracking systems. So you want to make sure that those are the keywords that are matching what's on the job posting, but of course you also want to make sure that those are the words that are applicable to you and your experience. So we don't want to say something that is not applicable to you just to keyword stuff the resume. For IT and engineering professionals, I always include as much computer experience as you have experience with hardware, software, operating systems, programming languages. Any and all of the above are most likely going to be keywords on a resume or on an applicant tracking system, so you want to make sure you include those. Language, so any foreign language that you speak, and make sure that we include your fluency level. So can you speak it? Can you read it? Are you fluent in something? Make sure that we include that. Some general skills that you want to include will probably be communications, problem solving, and leadership skills. I think that those are probably the top 3 that I see on resumes these days. And there's some optional categories here, and not everybody is going to have information to fill in each of these categories, but if you do, then go ahead and include them on your resume. So some professions require you to have a licensure or a certification. Some extra credentials or additional training may be required to get into that profession, so you'll want to include all of that information. Publications: did you help write an article? Did you present a paper at a seminar or something like that? Make sure that we include all of those things as well. Let's see, Cheryl just asked, teaching certificate, but it's lapsed. Is it worth including? Yes, Cheryl, I would include the teaching certificate, but in parentheses behind it, I would say expired. And then you can always take that off if you decide to go back and reactivate that. So extracurricular activities and professional affiliations. So if you're a member of, for example, I'm a member of the Society of Human Resources Management. So I would put that I'm a member of that. If I was on the board, then I would want to make sure that I put board member as well. Any military service is always important to include. Honors and awards and volunteer experience as well. So if you received honors in school, if you've graduated with honors or you've received high honors for something, then you want to include that. A lot of times employers will give out awards as well, and then that's always a good thing to include on your resume also. So once you're done writing your resume, you want to take a step back and ask yourself these questions. Does your resume look appealing? Is it clearly labeled with appropriate headings? Does it highlight your relevant skills and abilities? Have you had it critiqued by others? And have you triple checked it for accuracy? As you know, and as we've already discussed, a single error could eliminate you from consideration for the position. So as I said earlier, I would make sure that you have a third party read it, maybe even a couple, before you send it off to that job. So here's a couple of examples of resumes, and I know they're small, and if anybody would like a couple of these, I can certainly forward them samples. I have samples for many different disciplines, so these are just, I pulled a couple. This one and the next slide are a couple of samples. As you can see, this one's an IT resume, so this one is an individual who had more experience than the previous one. This one is, we did a very robust professional summary on there, moved into this individual's core competencies, then worked into their job history, and as you can see, did a summary of their work experience, and then there's a little heading there that you can probably barely see with key accomplishments on there, and then the key accomplishments are in bullets. Oh, and I'm getting lots of emails asking, or lots of things saying that they're interested in samples. If you, I don't have people's email addresses. If you guys could all email me at Leslie, Leslie, at tothresumeconsulting.com, then I would be more than happy to share those with you. And if you have a specific profession that you're in that you'd like me to share a sample for, I can definitely do that. I have many, many of them. I know we've talked a lot about resumes in the last about 35 or 40 minutes. I do want to talk about cover letters. I get the question a lot. Are cover letters really necessary? Do I really have to write a cover letter for this job that I'm applying for? My answer is yes. Cover letters are still a very important piece of the job search process. And I know I'm probably hearing a collective groan from everybody that they don't want to write them. But I think they're still very important. And a lot of times the hiring managers read those to see if the individual can write. So resume writing is very, very different than cover letter writing. So resume writing is much more business writing, whereas cover letter writing, you want to make sure that you're stating clear sentences and being able to write properly. So you want to use a standard business format. And yes, each letter should be customized for each position. You want to establish a personal contact if you can. So if at all possible, address that letter to a specific person. Your cover letter should be one page only. It should be, I typically tell my clients, 3 paragraphs. Your introductory paragraph, why you're qualified for the position should be paragraph number 2, what you bring to the table, maybe pull a couple of bullet points from your resume of examples of things that qualify you for the job, and then your last paragraph being the closing statement, and then asking for the interview. Oh, and Deb just asked, would the shaded boxes or borders be read as a graphic and get kicked out of the system? Nope, I write resumes with that, or use that format a lot for resumes, and people seem to like it because it's very modern looking, and I've never had a problem with it being kicked out of an applicant tracking system. In fact, right now my current resume is in that same format with the shading and the borders, so nope, I've never had a problem with it. Oh, and then I just talked about the 3 different paragraphs. We already went over that of what you should have in your cover letter. So paragraph 1 is the position you're applying for and how you found out. Paragraph 2, why do you want to work for the employer and why should they hire you? Basically your value proposition, again, selling yourself to the employer. Paragraph 3 being your next step, indicate how you want to follow through. Tell them you're going to contact them next week or however the next action would be. And that's it. Any questions? I know I've answered a few questions along the way, and people have had, as we've gone through, people have had some great questions. Is there anything else that anybody has questions on? Deb just asked, should the cover letter header be the same as the resume header? Yes, absolutely. I always, whenever I write a resume and a cover letter, they're always consistent. I use the same. If you've used a border on your resume, you want to use a border on the cover letter. Most definitely. Same font, same style, everything. Following up after you send in your resume and cover letter, what do you recommend? So Tom, I would, if you can get the name of a person, then I would definitely follow up with either the hiring manager or the person who's posting the position. LinkedIn is an amazing resource these days that you can use to go out and research companies and people and everything else. So if you can get a hold of that information, then I would absolutely follow up. If you can't follow up, finding somebody on LinkedIn, then I would certainly call into the company and ask to talk to the human resources manager and see if you can at least speak to somebody and find out where they're at in the process and let them know that you're interested. Joe asked about references. So I don't put references on resumes anymore when I write them, only because when you're filling out either a paper application or an online employment application, they're going to ask you for that information, so it's not necessary to put references in there. Doug is asking, he has 4 years of professional experience and 2 internships prior. Should I include all of this on my resume if it runs to 2 pages? Yes, Doug. If you've had a couple of internships, and then I guess depending on how many positions you've had in the last 4 years, if it's 1 or 2, we probably couldn't cram all that into a 1-page resume. I would probably expand it to 2. My caveat is always, I don't want to do a 1-page or do a 2-page resume, but really it's a 1-page with 4 lines on the next page. So you want to make sure that you're either going to fill 3/4 of that second page with information, or let's try and figure out a way to condense it down into 1 page. So Cheryl says, the cover letter sounds similar to the professional summary. How do I avoid repeating myself? Just changing up the language. The professional summary is going to be written in more business language, almost like a bullet point statement. The cover letter is going to be something that's more finessed. It's going to be a little bit more stylized to you and personalized to your writing style. Oh, so Joe's asking about dates of employment. So when I write resumes, I typically write only the years. So if you were in a position from 2010 to 2015, I would only write 2010 to 2015. It covers up the gaps a little bit if you have gaps in employment. And then on the application, the employers will probably ask you for month and date, month and year. You can then put that there and then explain the gaps in employment. But on the resume initially, I would only do years. And that's pretty typical common practice. Every writer that I know writes only years on their resumes. All right. Suggestions for resumes from someone going from retirement back into the workforce. So if you've been out of the workforce for a while, and I actually write a lot of resumes for retirees and for moms that have been out for a while and want to get back into the workforce and things like that. So, in absence of current work experience, what I will put is maybe volunteer experience, part-time jobs, anything that we can think to include to show that you are active and staying relevant, whether it's in your career field or not. I want to make sure that I show that you've been active in doing things over the course of the last, however long it's been, 5 years or 10 years or whatever. Let's see here. Tom says, as a reader of resumes, if I only see years, I apply the prison rule. If I don't know where you were, I assume you were in prison. That's funny, Tom. I like that. Typically, and I've polled a lot of resume writers, and I'm actually a part of a mastermind group, and we all write just years at this point, and I think that you're going to see the change is going to that more and more. People are just writing years on their resume, and then if they want more detail, or if they want to provide more detail, then they'll provide it on the employment application. Any other questions?
Leslie,
Yes.
I have some questions for you as people are typing. So go ahead and keep typing, guys. Don't let me interrupt your questions if you have them. But as you were talking, I want to, first of all, thank you for this presentation. It was great. You gave a great overview of how to kind of like approach the resume generically. And I know if you were to work with any of these people that are here, you would get more specific about their needs. So this is a hard topic to cover because everybody has specific careers and different things they're trying to get into. So, but I want to reiterate a point that you made about being very specific about the job you're applying for. I have run into this scattershot model of just sending your resume everywhere. And I wonder if you can kind of reinforce that point to write the resume to the job you're applying for and help people kind of get into the mind of like the HR person. Because think about this as okay, these people are in science, technology, engineering, and math, right? And maybe an HR person doesn't know what all those code words are that you're putting on resume, but it's in the job description. Can you talk about a little bit about that gap, about how if I'm a STEM person, how do I talk to an HR person?
Sure. So, first of all, when I see technical things on a resume, if it's something that's obscure or you think that the general public isn't going to know or understand, put something in parentheses behind it. I can tell you, my previous company that I worked for, we were like filled with acronyms. Everything had an acronym. I swear we probably had, I don't know, a 12-page binder of acronyms. So if I was going to write my resume and list all those acronyms, I would definitely put in parentheses behind it what all those meant, just so that somebody, you, David, would know what I was talking about. So same thing stands to reason here. You want to describe what you've done, and you also want to educate the reader a little bit on what that has been. So if you can put something in parentheses or describe it a little bit more, then you will, I'm reading these comments here. Joe's cracking me up. You will want to make sure that you describe it a little bit more thoroughly to the reader. Because you're right, HR people, although they may work for the organization, probably do not have a scientific background and will not always understand what people are talking about. And the other thing I think that I wanted to point out that I'm not sure, I think I forgot to point this out. When you're in a scientific, especially scientific education industry, your resume is probably okay being 3 pages. I write a lot of resumes for scientists who end up being 3 and 4 pages. The body of their work, what they've done, is 2 pages with their education, their experience, their research experience, and all of that. We typically will do an addendum then with all of their publications, because people who are in research and scientific careers will then have a ton of publications that we'll want to make sure we list as well. So I usually do an addendum for those. Does that answer your question, David?
Yes, and you brought me to a great segue to my next question. Can you differentiate for our audience the difference between when to use a CV and a resume?
Yes. So A resume is typically used for somebody engineering, IT, HR, accounting, kind of the general professions. Anybody scientific is going to have a CV, whether you're a scientist, a researcher, a physician, a pharmacist. Those types of careers are typically going to be a CV. Now, in this day and age, there's not a huge difference. I would say 10, 12 years ago, there was a much bigger difference in style, writing style, and format from a resume to a CV. CVs can be a lot longer, as I was just saying with the publications and things like that, but the writing style itself is very much the same these days.
Thank you. Going back to your cover letter, so if I'm a job applicant and I'm emailing you my resume and cover letter, should I do a cover letter or should I just put it in the text of the email? That's a question that we get a lot here.
So my recommendation and my personal preference as an HR person is to include that information. So if you're writing the cover letter, don't attach a second Word document. Don't make it harder for the reader to figure out which one is the resume and which one's the cover letter. Put the body of your cover letter in the body of the email. So when that reader opens it up, they see, my name is David, I'm applying for this job, and then my resume is attached. It makes it much easier for the reader, and they can fly through resumes and read them a lot quicker than they would if they had to open up 2 attachments.
Another question that I have. So the applicant tracking systems are a tool for HR people that helps them to screen people out. It doesn't really help job seekers. So how do job seekers get around the applicant tracking system to actually be able to get a human being to touch their resume and to talk to them? You have any ideas about that?
I do, and I get this question a lot, and that goes back to the keywords and printing off. I'm old school. I like to print something off. I like to have it in front of me, so I print off every job posting if I'm applying for a job, go through with my highlighter, highlight the keywords for the position, because chances are that HR person has taken the keywords that they're using to filter resumes, they pulled them right from that job posting. And then make sure that you have those keywords in the resume. And I'm going to use an example here. Project manager versus project management. So if you have project manager on your resume and you have it a couple different times, but the HR person has listed project management as a required experience on the job posting, and they've used that word as a filter on their applicant tracking system, your resume is going to get kicked out because, as we all know, computers are literal, extremely literal, right? It's only going to put in it's only going to pull out what they put into it. It's not reading project manager. You and I would say, okay, project manager, project management, that makes sense. That's the same thing. To the computer, it's not. So if you see something like that, then you're going to have to make that change. All right, looks like I got some questions here. Doug's asking, if I have a friend that works at the company, should you name drop in the cover letter saying is how you found out about the opening? I would not. I am not, it's my personal preference. I'm not a name dropper, and I don't like that being used in a cover letter. You also do not know what that person's reputation is in the organization. So you may think that your friend is a great person. Their HR person may think of him as a troublemaker. The hiring manager may not, for some reason, like that individual. So I would typically stay away from name dropping, if at all possible. Other questions?
I want to pull out, it looks like Cheryl's typing something, so I've got another kind of, I don't know if this is a question or comment. Let's see how it comes out. So I am wondering about the idea of the applicant tracking system again, especially big companies use these, right? So there's a difference between my resume that I put like into Microsoft Word or I'd save as a PDF file that can be used to email, right? It's also something that I'm going to upload if it's asked for in the applicant tracking system. But those systems also use, like you've mentioned, an application. So I think this is one of the points you made about kind of formatting. This is why you can format it any way that you want, because you're basically going to upload it. But I think that you would need to be careful when you're doing the applicant tracking system. You can put exactly what's on your resume in that, but you have to be careful to read to make sure that you're not sometimes putting your formatting into their applicant tracking system, because that's where the trouble comes in. And I just wanted to point that out. You kind of alluded to that, but I don't think you said that directly. So.
No, that's right, David, and thank you for pointing that out. And the other thing that I forgot, it was on my notes here, and I started reading questions and forgot to add was applicant tracking systems cannot read tables. And I know a lot of people like to put tables, they may have a section for core competencies in the middle to the top of their resume, and they may include it as a table in a Word document. The applicant tracking system cannot read that table. So that section where you may have your core competencies or your key skills, it's not going to find it. It's basically going to be a blank section on that document. So you want to make sure that, putting tab stops in, maybe, putting them into 3 columns, something like that. It reads columns and it reads tab stops, but the table itself it will not read. So any information that you have in a table, make sure you take it out. Cheryl asked a question for references. How far can you reach out? She works in a school. Parents, clients count as professional references. So my rule of thumb is if my work has not impacted that individual somehow, I would not ask my neighbor. I wouldn't ask my girlfriend. Some people think that they can use those as professional references. Definitely not. If my work has impacted them in some way, somehow, did I do a job for them? Did I work for them directly? As a teacher, did I teach one of their children? Those are things that those are the types of relationships that you can use. But I know I get the question a lot of times, can I use my neighbor as a reference? Can I use my girlfriend as a reference? No, definitely not.
Thank you. You have given a lot of great comment in here, a lot of great stuff for people to think about. And I want to give you a chance to kind of just give a summary about how a STEM resume is different, or how it differs from maybe like just a standard business resume. If you could just maybe summarize that and then give us any kind of closing thoughts. And after that, I've got a couple things to say and we'll be done. So if you guys have questions here, this is your last chance to get 1 or 2 in.
Sure. So, like I said before, the STEM resumes are a little bit different, but they're very similar to regular industry resumes, for an accountant or a marketing person or an HR person or something like that. The writing styles are going to be very similar. The content itself is probably going to be more technical, so you're going to want to make sure that you're describing it well enough so that the layman can understand it. So somebody who's not technical, who's not scientific, is going to be able to understand what you're saying. And I think the old philosophy of having, the 2-page resume somewhat goes out the window for the scientific people and the CVs, because you can have 3 and 4 and 5 pages of publications. So I think that's that old theory of everything's got to be 1 or 2 pages is definitely not going to stand true necessarily for somebody in the STEM field that has a lot of research experience. I can't think of anything else. I think those are probably the 2 biggest things. So if anybody has any other questions, I know my email was put up already, but that's Leslie@tothresumeconsulting.com. My website is www.tothresumeconsulting.com, and my phone number is 888-203-7607. And anybody who has additional questions, would like samples, or would like me to review their resume, I'd be more than happy to. My website does say I do free resume critiques, so feel free to send over your resume. I'd be more than happy to take a look at it and give you my thoughts. And I get the question all the time, well, if I send you my resume, you're going to tell me that I need a new one, right? Honestly, no. I will tell you, this morning I read somebody's resume, I told them it looked fabulous, and they did not need my services. So feel free to send over your resume. I'd be more than happy to review it for you. But thank you very much for being on the call today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Leslie, and that concludes Leslie's presentation. I just want to tell you, thank you for being here, Spartans. The MSU Alumni Lens exists to build a portfolio of professionally and personally enriching content and experiences for Spartans around the globe. We're constantly looking for ideas regarding content and experiences that will help Spartans to grow personally and professionally. So if you have ideas of presenters or topics that you'd like to see, please feel free to shoot me an email. That's isbeld@msu.edu. So we really want to hear from you. I mean that. Go ahead and shoot us your thoughts about what you'd like to see. Next webinar is coming up. So we have May 28th, Closing the Gender Gap in the Boardroom. June 11th is Global Marketability in the Age of Limitless Borders. I think that those are going to be some pretty interesting topics. If you know any teachers, or if you're a teacher yourself, watch for some things this summer. We've got some exciting content just for you teachers out there coming up. You can find all of our stuff at alumni.msu.edu/lens. And these webinars are made possible by gifts from generous donors. So if you liked what you saw today, if you like what we're doing, please consider giving us a donation. You can find that again at alumni.msu.edu, and you can just make your gift out to Alumni Lens. We'd appreciate it. So with that, thank you very much for being here. We look forward to seeing you again sometime. Go Green.